Good morning, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome all of you to the Department of Justice celebration of Women's History Month. The theme for this year's Women's History Month, which is working to form a more perfect union, honoring women in public service and government. There really couldn't be a much more appropriate theme for the Department of Justice, and particularly this Department of Justice. Across the department, more than 44,000 women have dedicated themselves to this department's mission of seeking justice. Today, we have several of the department's female leaders who are going to participate in a panel discussion after we have remarks from the Attorney General. But it's not just components heads who make this Department of Justice what it is today. It really takes all 44,000 women working toward our common mission and working to support each other to make this department what it is. But there's one woman in particular that I'd like to focus on here for a moment. We are fortunate to have an absolutely remarkable woman at the helm of the Department of Justice. As you all know, Loretta Lynch, the 83rd Attorney General of the United States, is just the second woman ever to hold that position. Our department, and indeed our entire country, is the beneficiary of her steady hand and her commitment to the department's principles. We are grateful that she is here with us today to share her insights on Women's History Month. So it is my privilege to introduce to all of you our Attorney General, Loretta Lynch.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Okay, this is Women's History Month. Got to represent. Good morning, everyone. There we go. There we go. So this is a time when women's voices have been heard, really unlike any other generation, I think. So I want to thank you all for coming here today. I want to thank our Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, for that kind introduction and for her partnership in leading this department, but also for her friendship over the years, as we both have occupied different positions and now are so privileged to be able to work with and for all of you. I want to thank Richard Toscano and his fabulous team for putting this outstanding program together. This is just emblematic of the care and dedication that Richard and his entire team devote to all of our special interest programs. And it's just so important because it builds on the department's really proud record of celebrating diversity, of thought, of background, of gender, of ideas, all the strengths that come together and make this such a great place. So I'm so happy to be here to celebrate Women's History Month, to recognize the tremendous progress that we have made, and to also recommit ourselves, as we do at these important events, to the work that is still to be done. As you've heard, the theme of this year's Women's History Month, working to form a more perfect union, honoring women in public service and government. This could not be more appropriate, not just for our celebration, but also for this department. Because over the years, over the generations, over all of the conflicts that we've overseen, working to form that more perfect union has been this Department of Justice's defining mission, particularly in areas where, as here, sometimes the law itself was used to make access to the full participation in our democracy difficult, if not impossible, for particular groups. And we stand here today celebrating the achievements of this department, the women on this stage, the 44,000 women who make up this great workforce. Not even 100 years after the passage of the 19th Amendment that allowed women the right to vote. That won't happen until 2020. And it seems strange to look back and see that while some states and some territories did embrace women's suffrage, as an idea, it almost split our nation again after the Civil War. The debates, the arguments, the legal challenges, the literal suffering endured by women who just wanted to participate in this union to indeed make it a more perfect union. And it seems hard to believe that at one time, the law perpetrated that. Women couldn't enter contracts or own property. And once you married, you literally lost your legal identity. You know, try telling that to any husband today. But it was in fact the situation that we found ourselves in. But one of the strengths of our democracy, and in fact one of the strengths and in fact the enduring missions of this department, is embedded in that phrase, to form a more perfect union. It recognizes that initially what we put together, while wonderful, while beautiful, while aspirational, did in fact not include everyone in our great country at that time, and that we had work to do then, and that we have work to do now. A more perfect union, not already perfect, but one in which we're moving and we're striving together to grow, to challenge old ideas, and in fact, to use the law, the tool of ultimate equality, to move this country towards the promise of equality for all. A more perfect union. And of course, as we now see, this country, and specifically the mission of this great Department of Justice, depends on and benefits from the contributions of women as never before. Here in the department, we exemplify the full panoply of women's strengths, women's dedication, and women's commitment. And because of everything that we do in conjunction with all of our partners, this is in fact the great department that it is. Women serve this department as prosecutors, as paralegals, trial attorneys, as special agents, spokespeople, support staff. They investigate and prosecute the toughest, most difficult cases. They apprehend the most dangerous fugitives that we have. If anyone thinks that women aren't tough enough to do all that, just think back to junior high school. We represent the federal government in litigation. We safeguard consumers. We protect the environment. We uphold civil rights, combat waste, fraud, and abuse. The women of this department, of whom I am so proud to be a member, ensure the accuracy of our budgets. They ensure the soundness of our infrastructure. They look after the health of our employees and the security of our facilities. We are an integral part of this department. Women are essential to our ongoing efforts to protect the rights and well-being of every American. And the central role that every woman in this department plays, every single one of us, is proof of this department's commitment to embodying the values that we defend every day, to form a more perfect union. Now, this year's celebration is made particularly special by the number of women who occupy leadership positions in the department, a significant change from just 2 decades ago when Janet Reno made history as this country's first female Attorney General. I have the incredible honor of following in her footsteps in leading this great department. And I have the incredible honor also to have the critical support of an outstanding Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, who previously broke ground as the first woman to serve as U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of Georgia, and in my view, the best, as well as the assistance of the many talented and dedicated women that you see and who serve as component heads, several of whom you're going to have a chance to hear from in just a moment. Our stage really isn't even big enough to accommodate all the women in leadership positions in this department. So we've selected people who we feel who their stories are going to have particular resonance with all of you. But their presence on this stage is a testament to just how far this department and this nation have come. And it also represents the beacon of opportunity that is this Department of Justice. For decades and generations, it has been the Department of Justice that people have looked to ensure equality, to fight the battle against discrimination, and to be a leader in these efforts. I myself remember joining this department some 26 years ago this month, in March of 1990. And I was drawn to a U.S. Attorney's office and to a practice that showed me women leading that office and headlining major cases, criminal and civil. And one of those groundbreaking women lawyers whose work I so admired is here on stage today as our Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division. Leslie Caldwell. And it's been my privilege to be inspired by all of our other panelists as well, as they lead our department with tenacity, with determination, with courage, and with consummate grace. Now, of course, there's more work to be done. When you form a more perfect union, that work is never done. But women remain underrepresented in government and business, and throughout the country, women continue to face a number of uniquely difficult challenges. And here at the department, we are working tirelessly to confront and to overcome those challenges, from addressing gender bias in policing, to supporting the victims of intimate partner violence, and from our work to end human trafficking, to our efforts against discrimination in the workplace. In every case, in every instance, we are striving to uphold the ideals of this department, to break down the barriers that hold women back, to remove the roadblocks that obstruct paths to success, to form a more perfect union. And more than ever, we are dedicated to ensuring that our nation's promises of freedom, opportunity, and justice for all are delivered equally across gender lines. Now, we all know it's no easy task. History tells us that there's opposition. History shows us that this has been a struggle since the beginning of our republic. But history also shows us what happens when determined women come together and refuse to be suppressed and refuse to be silenced. They get a constitutional amendment. History shows us what happens when women refuse to be told, no, you can't play that sport. No, you can't go to law school. They become leaders of the Department of Justice. And history also shows us what women can do every day to support their families and lead this nation and make this country the great place that it is, to form a more perfect union. There's no higher task for all of us, and there's no group of women more suited to carrying this task out than the women of the Department of Justice. Thank you for coming to this program, but thank you so much for supporting this goal, this department, and all of us as we work together to form that more perfect union. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Attorney General Lynch for her inspiring remarks, but even more importantly, for her inspiring leadership of this department. We are now going to turn to a panel discussion of 6 component heads from the Department of Justice. This is sort of the up-close and personal part of the program here. We have with us today, you all know them and they need no introduction, but I'll introduce them anyway. Their names are, first we have Leslie Caldwell, who is the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Caroline Ciraolo, who is the Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Tax Division, Lisa Foster, who is the Director of Access to Justice, Vanita Gupta, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Bea Hanson, who is the Principal Deputy Director of the Office of Violence Against Women, and Karol Mason, who is the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs. So Leslie, you're first on the end. I'll start with you. This is sort of the Oprah Winfrey role that I have here, but no one is getting a car today, so I will warn you about that. But I'll start first with you, Leslie. You've been in public service for a long time. Some folks here might not know that you were in AUSA going back to 1987 in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I go back to 1989, so it's not that old. And that you then led the Enron Task Force. But what first drew you to public service?
So I wish I could say that I was motivated by wanting to be in public service. But in fact, I was motivated by wanting to get trial experience. I was a young associate at a law firm, and I really wanted to try cases, and I thought going to the U.S. Attorney's Office would be the best way to do that. And my plan, to the extent I had one, I obviously didn't follow it, was to be there for maybe 3 to 5 years, learn how to try cases, and then go back and be a partner in a New York law firm. And when I got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I realized that it was so much more than just learning how to try cases. And I realized the value of public service. The job was really fun. I don't need to tell all of you that, but it was just a really wonderful experience to see your job, the things you do every day, actually have a really powerful geometric effect on the public, and to see when you convict the really bad violent gang in a particular part of a neighborhood, that neighborhood is safe after that case is over. And that had a really powerful effect on me. So as the DAG said, my 3 years turned into 16 years, ending with the Enron task force, and then I finally went back to private practice. But I was thrilled with the opportunity, this time coming here for the right reasons with the right motivations to do this job.
Did you have any particular female role models, either while you were growing up or during the early time of your career?
So this is a very much of a cliche, but I would say that my female role model was my mom. She was a housewife, and she raised 3 kids, but she was always somebody who was fearless and would do anything. She was the president of all sorts of different volunteer organizations. She was all over doing things. My father and my mother had a very, I think for that time, atypical relationship. There was never any doubt that they were equals in their marriage and equals in raising us, and they let my brothers and I believe that we could do anything. And it would have been good if some point somebody had said to me, no, you can't play that sport, because up until I was about 12, I wanted to be a professional Major League Baseball pitcher. And I practiced constantly in the backyard, and although he wasn't a pitcher, my idol was Roberto Clemente, so I'm from Pittsburgh. And it would have been good if somebody had said, maybe you should try tennis. But I really did believe that I could be a professional baseball player until I was about 12 years old, when I hit the brick wall of boys only little league. So anyway, that's that.
Well, whatever your mom did, it seems to have worked out, okay? So. Well, Caroline, in contrast to Leslie, you have spent most of your career in the private sector prior to coming to the Department of Justice. Can you contrast your experiences in the private sector with your experience here at DOJ?
Sure, thank you. So I think my days were pretty long in private practice. I worked at a regional firm in Baltimore in civil and criminal tax controversy matters, and we pretty much worked around the clock. So coming to the department, I didn't think the days could get longer. In fact, they have gotten longer, but they seem to go by much more quickly these days. The commute's a little longer. But I think the biggest change is being able to work with so many incredible people from all across the country that are so committed to one mission of doing justice and doing the right thing. It's an incredible opportunity. I loved every day of private practice. There really wasn't a day that I didn't want to go into the office and work with my clients. But this opportunity is, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I think that's the difference between private practice and being able to serve the public in this capacity.
Lisa, you've had a varied career and have served in the public sector in a variety of capacities, both as a Superior Court judge in California, with legal aid, and now at DOJ. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about how to encourage and how to get more women in leadership positions, not just at DOJ, but across government?
I like that you said varied. Most people say checkered. Let me start first with some historical context. For women of my vintage, and certainly for women a generation before me, government service was all you could think about if you were going into the law. You couldn't get jobs in private law firms. You got jobs in government. And so the doors to the public sector have been open for women longer than the doors in the private sector. That said, letting women in doesn't mean that we elevate them and promote them into leadership positions. So I have a couple of thoughts, although I think they apply to men as well as women. One is that we need to develop leaders. I'm someone who thinks that while there are some born leaders, most of us can learn to be leaders. It's like writing. I think there are some people who are just so naturally talented and they're wonderful writers, but you can teach anybody to be a competent writer, and I think we can teach people to be good leaders and competent leaders and advance in their careers. And I think we do that by providing training opportunities. The LEAP program that the department runs is a great program. It probably doesn't serve quite enough people, and it's a big time commitment. So trying to figure out ways that we could bring leaders together, or folks who are identified by leadership as potential leaders, into just smaller groups and provide some interesting opportunities to talk about what leadership skills are and how you cultivate them, I think would go a long way.
Thanks, Lisa. Vanita, you have long worked in the public interest, but are relatively new to the public sector. How do you think your gender has influenced your career path?
So actually, it's a little bit of a hard question because to me, there's no question that gender has influenced my career and who I am as a person. But so much of that is also kind of interacting with the fact that I'm a children of immigrants, my race, my national origin. And so for me, it's a little bit hard to kind of disentangle all of those things. I think that what I know to be true is that people are more likely to make assumptions about who you are, given, whether you're a woman or kind of the combination of woman of color and the like, and that oftentimes the initial interactions, you can see people's minds beginning to make different, judgments and kind of have to course correct about assumptions and the like because of that. And I think that there are ways in which I think a lot more about those initial interactions than maybe I might if I wasn't a woman. I also, the fact that I'm a mother of young children and those questions about how can you have it all? How do you balance those things? Those are things that I think about in very practical and concrete ways every day as a senior leader here at the Justice Department. But I also think another way in which my gender has influenced my career is that I think there's no question, and maybe for many of you in this room, whether you're male or female, whether you're a person of color or not, it has been very true to me that I am where I am because people have taken the time to reach out and to mentor me and to make sure that I had that mentorship, because I do think that for a lot of women it is much harder without folks really looking out for you and looking out to recognize talents and skills and leadership and cultivating that. Those things are critically essential to being able to advance in any institution and to be supported in those institutions.
All right, Bea, you're the one up here who's not a lawyer among us, and we are grateful for that, to be able to get a little bit of a different perspective. As someone who has her PhD in social work, do you think men and women make different kinds of leaders? Does it really make any difference?
How long do I have? No, it's interesting to be in the Department of Justice because I think, and I hope that we, when we look at justice broadly, and not just through the kind of legal aspects of it. And I think, my career has been really around justice and looking at movements, and looking at civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and LGBT rights movement has been really influential for me. I thought about this question about male versus female leadership, and I think that it really depends on how comfortable we are as leaders, regardless of our gender. How do we make sure that we listen to each other? How do we make sure that we're inclusive in the conversations that we have? How do we make sure that our ego isn't in the way? How do we make decisions that are really inclusive of creation of a team and including that team aspect of it? How do we allow staff to make mistakes, to be creative, to take responsibility of things? I think some of those things we could talk about as male versus female attributes, but how do we work together and looking those attributes that seem to be essentially male or essentially female and pull those things together to make sure that as leaders we're respectful of each other, that we're really building teams so that we're going toward a common good and that more perfect union that the Attorney General talked about.
Nice segue back to the AGs. Impressive, Bea. Well, Karol, you've had a long and successful professional career in private practice prior to coming to the department. What role did mentors play in your career?
So I would say that we need to think more broadly when you think about who mentors are. Mentors don't have to be people who are in leadership positions, and they don't have to look like you. So the two stories I like to tell is, like Leslie may kill me for this, but like Leslie and Lisa, we're contemporaries age-wise. And so when I was coming along, there weren't women in the positions like we have now. And so for leaders, for mentors, for me, I got lucky that I came along in a time period where the men at the firm all had daughters that they wanted to see successful. So I was at a period where they were beginning to change their perspective on women in careers because they were thinking about what opportunities their daughters would have. And then the second really important way I found mentors that I hope that you all really hear this part is through people who were the secretaries and the head of the word processing department, people who'd been in the institution for a long time and had seen people succeed and not succeed. And I know that Linda Sims, who was the head of what they now call secretarial support, but she was in charge of the work processing pool when I was there, and I learned more from Linda about how to be successful. I learned more from my secretary about how to be successful because they've seen everything. Curry Gunn here, and she'll probably kill me if she's watching. Curry Gunn is an institutional knowledge here that you ought to listen to if you want to succeed here. She knows how to do it. And so I say that to think expansively about how you view who mentors are.
And that's what we mean when we say it takes all 44,000 of us, not just the women on the stage. Well, Leslie, how have things changed for women in the department since you were in AUSA in 1987?
So I was very fortunate that I worked in an office that even back in 1987 had a very large percentage of women, and that was the Eastern District of New York. But then when I moved in 1999 to the Northern District of California, I was shocked to learn that the first woman in the criminal division had not been hired until well after I was in AUSA. And when she was hired, she was warned that she was the canary in the coal mine, and that if she didn't succeed, there were going to be no more women being hired into the criminal division. And unfortunately, I think the Northern District of California was much more typical back in those days than the Eastern District of New York was. And I think what's really changed is that women and men have gotten used to seeing women in strong positions, in positions of leadership. There's no assumption, I think, whether either, certainly not in the cities that I've worked in, that roles should be different between men and women professionally. And I think men have become just as accepting of that as women. And I think that's been incredibly important because it enables women to see themselves and to see their full potential as opposed to seeing limitations that are being imposed on them by other people's perceptions. And I think that's been a big change.
Caroline, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you in your career path? And do you think those challenges were gender specific?
So I gave this question some thought because I feel very fortunate and very blessed to have the opportunities that I've had in my career. But I think the biggest challenge has been trying to keep all the balls up in the air during the day and trying to be a good, I've accepted not perfect, but a good daughter, wife, mother, sister, friend, and lawyer. I don't think this is specific to gender, but I find that my female friends have become very good at multitasking in all the roles that they play, and they've strived to do this and done it well with a mix of humility, which I think is an important quality, a really strong sense of humor, and just incredibly hard work. So, in terms of gender specific.
Lisa, do you counsel your male and female employees or mentees differently?
No and yes. So I don't ever start out thinking that I'm going to counsel people differently. And I'm going to steal from Leslie because, of course, we all talked a little bit before this gathering. Her description of what she does for mentees is similar to mine, and that is you try to provide people with opportunities, you push them to take opportunities, and you support them in accepting those challenges and developing themselves. And over the years, I've tried to do that for both men and women. It's also true that sometimes the questions and the challenges that women have are different than the challenges that men have. Although I hasten to add that's changing. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have absolutely said women ask more questions and have more concerns about family and work-life balance. But increasingly, men are raising those questions, and that's all for the good, and I have better answers because the women ask those questions first. There are other ways in which I think women tend to need a different kind of mentoring. We talk a lot to each other and are often much more willing to share experiences and question what we've done, and so you have sometimes longer conversations with your women mentees. There are also ways in which women face still today challenges and how to respond to those challenges. So how to deal with opposing counsel who comments about how you look and probably wouldn't have made that comment to a man. How you address a question about are you married? Are you going to have children? Those things still come up today for women. And so the kinds of questions that you have to be ready to talk about are different.
Thank you. Vanita, what advice would you give to women here in the Department of Justice who want to move into a senior leadership position?
I think there's a lot of focus all the time on kind of the strength of our legal cases and our enforcement and the like. And I think obviously those things are critically important. You have to have those skills. But to me, what some of the characteristics that I think I most rely on as a senior leader, and that I know I see in the women at this table, are things that go much beyond that, which is a real kind of emotional intelligence around understanding how different people are going to view a particular problem and being able to understand that and be pragmatic and understand how you're going to bring them on and get them to a place of yes. Having integrity, I think, is incredibly important, and being identified as somebody with integrity who's going to have trust kind of at all levels, I think is really, really important. And then I would say perhaps the most critical, and all of these things are interrelated, are judgment. And that there is such a reliance when you're in a senior leadership position to needing to make really hard decisions quickly, often with the limited information you might have at any given moment. And that those are the combination of kind of emotional intelligence, integrity, and judgment. While I think everyone in leadership needs to possess those skills, I certainly think that that women won't necessarily succeed simply by kind of demonstrating their legal prowess as an attorney at the Justice Department, but that at all levels, these different things I think are the additional boosts that can sometimes be particularly distinct for mid-level managers to get to senior level positions because of the nature of the work here. And being able to demonstrate that at all levels, whether you're on support staff or as an attorney here at the Justice Department, to me, these are critically important things that define and make for good leaders at the department.
Great, thank you, Vanita. Bea, what, if anything, do you hope will be different for the next generation of women leaders, whether here at the department or more generally in public service?
I think that the big thing is making sure that women leadership really represents the diversity of women, that our race or the income level of our parents or our sexual orientation or our first language or disability doesn't really stop us from dreaming and striving and accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish. I think we've been moving in that direction, and I think a lot of the work of the department is trying to get us there, but we still have a long way to go. And also that we're accepted as women for who we are, and it's not because of the way we look or the way we wear our clothes or any of those things. We're just accepted for who we are.
Karol, you do a lot of work to help women and girls. What's your proudest accomplishment during your time at DOJ that you think will have a positive impact on the lives of women and girls?
So I'm going to answer in two ways. One, I'll answer about from a personal perspective and as it relates to women here in the department. I'm lucky. I get to work with a lot of younger women, and as many of them know, I like to adopt people. I'm single and childless, so I adopt lots of little sisters, and I'm old enough now that I have to call them my children, I think. But I like adopting them, and I like seeing them succeed, and I like seeing them grow and giving them opportunities to grow. And so for me, the biggest legacy that I will be proud of personally is when I like to say, sit in my rocking chair in 10, 15, 20 years and look on the news and see all these women that I've had the opportunity to cross paths with. From a policy perspective in terms of my job at the Office of Justice Programs, I think the biggest accomplishment in terms of helping women and girls is to understand that women and girls enter our criminal justice system in a different way that our young boys do. And they tend to enter it through being sexually abused, as Bea knows very well. And so what an accomplishment to me is that getting people to understand and recognize the gender differences of how people come into our criminal justice system, primarily as victims first, and getting people to focus on the fact that we need to see them as victims and deal with them as victims in the trauma care, and then that's a way to keep them out of our criminal justice system long term.
And now we'll close by asking each of our panelists to share with us an important piece of advice they've either given or received over the course of their career.
You're looking at me?
I'm looking at you. We can start on the other end if you'd rather.
So I think two things. One is people tend to focus on improving their weaknesses, their weak areas, and I think that's important, and everyone should always strive to get better at everything across the board. But I would recommend that you really focus on your strengths, and you go with your strengths, and you develop your strengths. Try to fix your weaknesses, but don't get bogged down by them. Go with your strengths. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid of something new, and don't be afraid of change. Change is good. It helps you develop. It helps you grow. Doing new things helps you develop and helps you grow. Doing things that you're not quite sure you can actually do is a really good thing to do. And I've done that a lot in my career and done a lot of things that were different and new and involved different geographies and different people. And I feel like it's really helped a lot. And so I would advise you to don't be afraid to try something new and to try something different, even if it's something you've never done before.
So get outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
Yeah. Caroline?
So when I was in private practice and I was working with young associates, I would always tell them, remember that everything you do matters. You know, every case, every assignment, every written product, it matters. Someone's looking at it and you're leaving footprints, you're building a legacy, you're building your reputation. So, always put in that extra effort to try and do your very best with everything, and it will pay off in the end. The other thing I would say is be kind. Be kind to yourself when you're judging yourself. Be kind to others, and particularly when no one else is watching, because that's when it matters the most.
So I have a little story. When I was an undergraduate, I took a class in constitutional law, which is how I decided to go to law school. And I was in the law library. We got to go to the law library as undergraduates because we were in this course. And I was Xeroxing a case to take home and read. And the case, whose name escapes me, was about pregnant, what were then called stewardesses. We now know them as flight attendants. And I'm Xeroxing the case, and a law student was standing next to me, and he said, "Oh, Jones versus Jones, that's about irrebuttable presumptions." And I looked at him completely baffled, and I said, "No, it's not. It's about pregnant stewardesses." And I tell that story. I've told it to law students, and I tell it to young lawyers, because it reminds us that the law is not about doctrine or principle or theory all the time, nor is life, nor is leadership. It's about people. It's about the pregnant flight attendants.
So mine's some combination probably of Leslie's and Caroline's, but maybe that's to be expected. I think that as women, we often kind of accept the boundaries and assumptions that are placed on us. And I think the key thing is to be able to maintain a sense of where you want to go and what you want to do, and not limit yourself by people's expectations or assumptions about who you are and what you bring to the table. But I also think, and this is absolutely true, that all of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my career have been also the ones that have at times made me the most uncomfortable. They've taken me out of my comfort zone, as you said. And it's a disruptive feeling. It's a feeling of not being secure and knowing exactly where to moor yourself. But it's also in those moments where leadership really comes about, and where, frankly, communities and people around the country or the world need that leadership the most. And so I think both of those things in combination with each other are critically important, and they kind of moor me at the times where things do feel a little less secure, but also maybe the most vital points for leadership and for women to lead.
I think two things for me. One is be who you are. We all have individual gifts, and I think sometimes, especially as women, we often try to think about how we should be in this situation or how we should react, but to be who we are. And the other thing is something someone once said to me is, if you see a fork in the road, take it. And too often we think, and I know I've had this in my passive, is like I have to find what the one right path is. And sometimes those paths are clear, but more often they're not very clear. But it's not really which path we take, but it's what we do with the choice that we make. That's really the most important.
So I would say take risks and be willing to make mistakes, because you can't grow if you don't make a mistake. Too many people try to live within the constraints of the safety zone and just always do it right. Well, you don't learn from not doing it right. You learn from making mistakes, and as others have said, it's what you do with the mistake. And the other piece of advice that I would say is your career path doesn't have to be a straight up path. It can take a downward turn. So when I came to government service, I was in my mid-50s, and I'd never worked in the government. And so at the time, I was the chairman of the management committee at my law firm, first black woman partner at my law firm. But I came as a deputy to the associate attorney general, which those of you who've been in private practice is like being an associate again. It was the best decision I ever made. And I remember Tom Pirelli calling me and saying, well, how do you feel about reporting to somebody younger than you are? He was 10 years younger than me. And I said, fine, as long as my peer group's not 20 and 30-year-olds, I'm fine. But it was the best decision I made to come in and learn about government and not be hung up on my position and my title. And had I not done that job, had I not taken that position and learned what government was like, what the department was about, what the Office of Justice Programs was about, I would never have been equipped for this position. So take risk and don't look at your path as having to be linear.
Thank you, Carol. Well, let's thank all of our panelists for their terrific leadership. We want to thank them for their terrific leadership of the department and for their willingness to open up and to share with all of us here today. And now, to conclude our program, I will turn the podium over to Granette Trent, who is the Assistant Director for Affirmative Employment with JMD's Equal Opportunity Employment Staff.
Hi, good morning. I am so excited. I'm about to pop because I'm super into girl power, and I just think this is just wonderful. Backstage, before they came out, to see these women together, connecting, talking, sharing, it's just so exciting to be a part of this today. I would like to thank all of you for attending in person today, and for those of you who are viewing the program on the Justice Television Network and also on the web. A special thanks to the Attorney General, who was able to come and deliver some very encouraging and inspiring remarks this morning, as well as Deputy Attorney General Yates for leading us today in this moderated panel discussion, and of course, our distinguished speakers, our leaders here at the department. It is just such an honor and a privilege to work in an organization where women are successfully, dynamically leading the charge. I would also like to recognize the DOJ component EEO offices for their activities this month in observance of Women's History Month. I want to thank you for your work in putting on programs in your corners of the department. That is a wonderful endeavor. Before you depart today, please complete the evaluation form that is included with your program. Your feedback is very, very helpful. We read these very carefully. We want to know the kinds of things and activities that you would like to see here at the department and how we can make these activities and events much more better for you. You may leave your completed application evaluation on your chair or with one of the members of the JMD EEO staff at the back of the Great Hall. This concludes today's Women's History Month Observance Program. Thank you again for coming. Please enjoy your afternoon. That was great.